Hello and welcome to our second episode of Steel City Shorts podcast. My name is Ryan Berry.
And I'm Alex Brown.
Today we'll be previewing the NHL season with special guest Katie Gauze from the Florida Panthers. Thank you for coming on, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to talking hockey.
Definitely.
So first topic, Katie. Every division was realigned because of the COVID situation in the NHL. And is there a particular division that sticks out to you as being a little more difficult than the others, or maybe a little bit easier? Because in most of these divisions, there's about 5 to 6 teams that could grab those top 4 spots.
Absolutely, you're right. I think in any division, you're going to have some pretty strong battles for those final positions. For me, and everything that I've seen and everything that I've read, it looks like the East Division is going to be really challenging. And I mean, you guys are familiar with that yourselves, being that the Penguins are going to be stuck right in the middle of it. We got a taste of it last night with their matchup against Philly. But I think that's a perfect example of why these division alignments are going to be exciting, because now you've got rivalry games pretty much every time they play. All these interdivisional matchups are really going to build the intensity. And by the time these teams have seen each other, 7 or 8 times by the end of the season, you've got Crosby, Ovechkin 8 times, and things are going to get heated. So I think it's going to make the hockey more difficult, but the excitement a lot better for us fans. And I'm looking forward to some of the matchups. But like you said, there's definitely going to be some very tight battles towards that 4th and 5th spot. There's no wild card this year, but those last positions are really going to be tough battles down the stretch. At least
every game's pretty much important this season. I mean, there's only 56 games, so got to win as many as you can.
Absolutely.
Within the first 10 games, I think you're going to know what your team's going to be. And that's why you have to get out to early start. And the Penguins are horrible early starts. And they should have won last night. I mean, they got the first goal and they gave up some 2 bad penalties that the Flyers capitalized, and then it was over from there. They came back twice. Then they got 2 goals in 20 seconds there in the third, and it was over. But if you look at the North Division, all Canadian teams, and I mean that's all intense to be all Canadian teams in the same division, and they're all pretty good teams. Besides, I mean, Ottawa's probably going to be at the bottom, but there's other teams, and it's intense in Canada. So if you were to look in Canada, is there a team there that sticks out as being a legitimate contender in that division?
Yeah, you know what? Interestingly enough, and we saw Toronto getting the overtime win over Montreal last night, but those are the 2 teams that I would probably pick as my potential contenders in terms of really sticking out in that division. Even though Montreal lost, I like what they did in the offseason, and I think that they've got a really strong offensive group that can do a lot of damage. So I'll be interested to see how those 2 teams shake out. Also really interested in looking forward to this Battle of Alberta that we're going to get to see, I believe, 10 times this season between Calgary and Edmonton. So those are kind of 2 different sets of teams that I think are going to be really interesting in the North Division.
Definitely. I mean, there's just so many important games like throughout the whole season. And that kind of brings me to my next question. What is the ideal structure of a team that can be successful? I mean, you're definitely going to need a hot goaltender.
100%. I think the goalie is going to be the most important player on every team this season, and having a good backup is equally important because of some of these back-to-back games, a very, very tight, packed in schedule. I also think depth across the lineup is important. And this year, we're going to see taxi squads being brought into the equation. Those are going to allow teams to, maybe pick and choose which players are getting in for certain games against certain opponents. Maybe they want a little bit more of a rough and tough guy in a game against, a more team that battles. So I think the use of the taxi squad will also be something that, we're not used to, but could be very valuable and allows teams a little bit more variety, because there's no question we're going to have guys that get COVID that have to go out, and you need guys that can come in and be ready to play. You hope it's not your goalie, but even that's a possibility. So definitely having a lot of depth across the roster is going to be the most important thing this year.
I would certainly agree with that. And then if you like the taxi squad, with there being, I believe it's 5 to 6 players on that squad, and in that position, you're probably going to they're practicing with the team every day. And what would you structure that as? Like, if you have a backup goalie already on the roster, would you focus that maybe like an extra goalie there, maybe 2 defensemen, 3 forwards?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on what the focus of your team is. Definitely another goalie on the squad, no question. For the Panthers, we've got Bobrovsky and Drieger as maybe our 1-2, but Sam Montembeault will be in there for the third. Some teams may even be carrying a fourth if they're really concerned about their structure there. But I would say probably heavier on the defensemen just because there's fewer to begin with. You can mix and match forwards a little bit more, whereas if you have a big defenseman go down, you don't want to be packing even more minutes onto a guy playing defense because those guys put up a lot to begin with. So, I think that would be probably the structure you go with, heavier on the defense and then make sure you've got at least one more goalie.
The thing with the Penguins, they have 2 goalies on the tactics squad. I've never heard of these guys, and there's some other players down there that they should maybe another defenseman or a forward because we needed forward depth since we lost some people this offseason. But 2 goalies, Ryan, we've never heard of these people before. They're on.
Yeah, and you've also got to remember too, you still have the AHL, which should be coming back here in February, and there will be the opportunity. Yeah, to bring guys up or go down. It's very difficult this year for all the lower feeder leagues with the NHL, just kind of doing whatever they are.
And since you cover the Panthers, Katie, and you do a great job doing it. And we're looking at the Mike Matheson and Colton Sceviour, who we acquired in the trade from Florida during the offseason in exchange for Hornquist. What should we be expecting from those 2?
Yeah, well, the big acquisition, they're both good players, but the main, chunk of that trade was obviously Mike Matheson being he brings in a lot of a cap hit. And, Matheson is a player who truly has all of the makings of a great defenseman and has just never seemed to find his game in the right place at the right time. He's an extremely unbelievably strong skater, and he has a lot of, got a phone call there. He's an extremely strong skater, but he also has a lot of good hockey sense. His struggle is often that he overthinks the game. So I think a lot of the times he needs to simplify it. And I'm hoping the coaches in Pittsburgh can help him find that. But I really feel like if he can get a change of scenery and start to get comfortable with the Penguins, that he can kind of spark his career back up. And there's definitely potential. And I've already seen people online starting to chirp him about, not being the best at puck handling, but it's going to take time. But Matty is a great guy. He's a wonderful influence in the room as well. From an off-ice perspective, he's a very good leader, just a really good person, very smart. So, he's a good guy to have. It's just it's gonna be a little bit of an adjustment period for him to find his game again. Colton Sceviour is, he's just a bread and butter kind of a guy. Your fourth line, strong, dependable, reliable guy who's gonna put in hard minutes. He's going to do the right things, be in the right places. He may not score tons of goals, but he's just very reliable. So you're going to see him, fourth line, solid guy, just kind of evening out that back end.
What I know is from Colton Sceviour is that he had some speed last night too, and he was pretty.
He's
fast.
Extremely fast. Yeah, actually, when he was in the AHL, he won the fastest skater competition at one point.
Oh, wow.
So he's a very speedy guy. And it'll be interesting to see what he does. But he certainly isn't going to be getting crazy minutes, but you can definitely rely on him.
And I feel like people are way overreacting over last night. I mean, I was looking at Twitter and people were like blaming the game on Matheson. I mean, it's one game, but if Matheson can step up, then that'd be big for this team because every year I feel like we have a hurt defenseman. I mean, if one guy can really step up and be one of those 4th, 5th guys or even 3rd guy, then that would really help the Penguins try to make it to the playoffs because this year it's going to be really hard to make the playoffs.
And the fans are always after some guy, and Matheson's going to be that scapegoat all year probably, like Jack Johnson.
Well, they knew coming in that he had some hiccups in his game, and they're just kind of latching onto that right away. But I think a few good games he can figure it out.
And he's a penalty killer, right?
Yeah. He puts in a lot of minutes. He's great on the PK. He honestly just thinks too much. He's almost too smart when he's out there, and he overthinks it to the point where then he makes a mistake because he waited too long. So, he definitely just needs to simplify the game. And I think with the coaching staff in Pittsburgh focusing on defense with him, I think it'll be a good situation. It's just going to take time.
For the next question, I mean, the Florida Panthers, I was watching that World Juniors. That goalie that they had from Team USA, he was absolutely putting up great numbers that tournament. And I feel like Florida Panthers, I mean, they have really good goalie situation for the future. You want to speak to that a little bit? Like, what have you seen from all these prospects for the Panthers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of funny. We have Bobrovsky, who, I still believe very confidently is going to have a big year for us. But when you look down our pipeline, our goaltending is extremely exciting. I mean, we never expected that this kid, Devin Levi, who was the Canadian goalie, we picked him 212th overall in the 7th round this year. And next thing you know, he's stealing the starting job for Team Canada, going head to head against Spencer, who we figured was obviously a lock for our future of goaltending. And Levi's really done some great things. But when you look at Spencer Knight, first round pick, 13th overall for us back in 2019. He's at Boston College. He's been absolutely lighting it up, putting ridiculous numbers up in the Hockey East. He's such a strong, reliable goalie. He's so calm and so composed for his age, and he just does all the technical things right. He's the kind of guy that makes saves that are insane look super easy. And then you go back and you watch it again in slow motion. You're like, how did he get over there? But he is always in the right place, and he makes it look easy. And when a goalie can make it look easy, then they're doing something right. And so Spencer Knight is very exciting. We've got Roberto Luongo here now heading our new goalie excellence department. So there's a real focus on goaltending moving forward for Florida. And with the prospects we have, with the guys we have on the team now, there's a lot of excitement. People should be happy in Florida, at least in the goaltending department. They're going to be taken care of for a while.
And they have a young core too. I mean, you have Jonathan Huberdeau down there, Barkov, Dadonov, so like Ekblad on defense, but you got some talented players, and then you got Duclair on a cheap deal, a really cheap deal. And I mean, what are the expectations in the second year under Joel Quenneville?
Yeah. So actually, to touch on it, so we did lose Dadonov, but that was to Ottawa this offseason. But we brought in Duclair, we brought in Carter Verhaeghe. It's funny to say that they're so young because they've been in the league 5 years or so now. Like these guys, Barkov, Huberdeau, Ekblad, seems like they've been around forever, but they're actually just now entering the prime of a career for a hockey player. So there's a lot of upside there. That's why we're still, always considered a part of the playoff race, because we have a strong core. If we're never really necessarily going to be in a rebuild when these guys are all here. We are trying to tweak the pieces around them to find the right fit. But, Aaron Ekblad had one of his best seasons since his first year as a rookie last season. He's finally got a dependable, reliable defensive partner in Mackenzie Weegar, who I think has really helped him to elevate his game. I mean, Barkov and Huberdeau, regardless of the outcome for the Panthers, are constantly putting themselves at the top of scoring in the NHL. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see Huberdeau back in the race for the Art Ross this year with points.
Thank you for that. That's great insight there. And in terms of health concerns, not pertaining to COVID, but in terms of injuries, when you jump back into the season, as they pretty quickly, and should there be an expectation for some injuries out of the gate?
I don't necessarily think so, just because for the most part, these guys, for one way or another, have had an ability to train all off season. This wasn't a situation where they were completely incapable of keeping themselves in shape. Will they be 100% game shape? Potentially no, but that's more a matter of like the intensity and not the actual physicality. These guys are all so professional with the way that they fuel their bodies, the nutrition, the trainers that they work with, the stability, the stretching, everything that they do is a full-blown job. Even when they leave the rink, they're constantly doing things to make sure that their bodies are prepared. So I think between the skating that they were able to do in their hometowns, I know, even for my brother this summer, he's finding ways to skate with guys in Pittsburgh, and there's plenty of pros out there. So guys always find ways to get ice time. And I don't think that they've been able to experience a game situation, but I think their bodies are ready for what that brings. And it's more a matter now of just adjusting to the intensity and, of course, a little bit of endurance as well.
And like with the adjusting the intensity, I mean, they didn't have any preseason games and the training camp was shortened, but I do completely agree with what you said about the injuries. I mean, they've been doing things the last 4 months. I mean, so they should be pretty much ready to go and shouldn't expect it other than just a normal injury that you would see in hockey.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, injuries are always going to happen, but I think guys are going to just be shaking off the rust. But again, not much time to do that because it's a 56-game season. So if you wait too long to shake off the rust, you're probably going to find yourselves in a bit of a hole. So I think these guys know what's at stake.
Definitely. And there's a lot of good teams, and it's going to be hard to make the playoffs with these new divisions. But what team that maybe isn't high in expectation this year, but could really surprise teams like maybe the New York Rangers, or what team do you think? Because I personally think the Rangers could really turn it around this season to make the playoffs.
I think the Rangers is a great one. I have that written down actually as well. Another team that I don't necessarily think it'll be a bubble playoff team. I don't expect them to make it, but I expect them to have a good showing is the Buffalo Sabres. I'm interested to see what Taylor Hall does with them. They've got Jack Quinn coming in from the draft. And earlier we talked about it a little bit, but the Montreal Canadiens are really interesting to me. Obviously they knocked the Penguins out of the bubble. A lot of that had to do with really strong goaltending, but Carey Price is still there. They just brought in another goaltender, Jake Allen, who's going to provide them with that depth in the goaltending position to share the load. They've got Shea Weber. He's just an unbelievable leader and a great defensive player. Bringing in Joel Edmondson. They've got Josh Anderson, who had 2 goals last night. Really, really impressed out of the gate. And then a very good young core with Nick Suzuki and Karaniemi. I see a lot of good things from Montreal, and I think that they are going to surprise people. Again, I don't know if they'll go. I don't expect them to go all the way with that group, but I think that they can really make a splash.
I think so too. That Montreal was pretty impressive last night, and they always have good goaltending, good defense. They made some nice offseason moves. They got Josh Anderson in there, and they got some nice players. I think a team that that might have a chance. The West Division. The West Division is not that good, and there's some teams in there that just aren't great. You got the Blues and you got the Knights, and those are the top 2 automatically. But if you look at the rest of it, there's three California teams. None of them were great at all last year. They're horrible. I think you were going to see one of them make the playoffs, and I think that one is going to be probably the Sharks. I think the Sharks will come back this year. I think they'll be a 3 or 4 seed in the West.
And then you also have to remember in the West, and for myself, we don't cover them really at all. It's a very rare time we see them. So I almost forget about them half the time. It feels like they're in a different league sometimes, but you got to remember that now Colorado will be out there as well. I mean, they're a huge threat this season with McKinnon. Their team is stacked, and they showed that last night. I mean, between them and St. Louis, that was some exciting hockey. So those are, I would say, St. Louis, Colorado, and Vegas are easy locks to really just clean up in the West. And I think any one of those teams could actually go very, very far, potentially right up to the Stanley Cup final.
And the offseason was shortened this year, but their teams made moves. What team do you think improved themselves the most this offseason?
It's tough, because of the flat cap. Teams weren't able to go out and make these huge, huge all-star acquisitions the way that they normally would have, with big spending and big contracts being handed out. I'm not saying that this is maybe the team that made all of the best moves, because they didn't have a ton they needed to improve on. But I feel like St. Louis made some very helpful acquisitions. Bringing in Torrey Krug, I mean, that's an incredible presence for your team. And then this one's obviously tough for us here in Florida, but Mike Hoffman is an unbelievable goal scorer. I know we're going to miss him. And with the core of scoring they already have in St. Louis, adding him into the mix on that wing of the power play with that shot is going to be lethal. I think, they didn't necessarily need to make moves to be better, but they certainly did improve. And those are huge ones in my book.
And a guy like Hoffman, he had to try out to make they had made him try out first before they gave him a contract.
There's a little bit of a caveat there. St. Louis, obviously knowing that they wanted Hoffman, wanted to be able to give him a little more money. So by waiting for camp to start, they were able to place 2 players, Pietrangelo and Steen, on that long-term injured reserve, and that allowed them to free up money. So the PTO was really more of a formality for the ultimate contract, but it still was funny thinking that Mike Hoffman was trying out for anything at this stage.
Yep, I mean, it's a little weird to try out with a really great defenseman, but he made the team. He's going to make a big impact for them. And to finish off with the last question, I mean, obviously you haven't been paying full attention to the Penguins, but obviously, people still pay a little bit of the attention to the Penguins because of the Penguins. What do you think the Penguins look like from an outsider's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always pay a little bit of attention just because that's the hometown team and I got to keep up with the family conversations. But when I look at, the group, I know there's been a little bit of a dip and expectations for the team, but like you said, the Penguins always seem to find a way to make waves and get involved because of the fact that they have such a really strong bottom line guy with Crosby and Malkin. I mean, their top six, when you look at them, I wrote it down. You've got Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, Rust, Zucker, and Kapanen, who I know isn't in right now, but will be. Those are six extremely strong players to be mixing up in your top two forward line pairings. So when I look at that, I think, okay, they maybe aren't as young as they used to be, but those are still extremely skilled players. And I think we can all say we saw it last night. Crosby does things that look impossible and makes it look easy. That goal he scored made that goalie probably want to go crawl under a rock, but he is Crosby and he will always find ways to do that. I don't think it matters how old he gets. He's going to make people look stupid every time that they are on the ice with him. And then you look at the blue line. I mean, Letang, another guy who's getting up there in age, but paired with Dumoulin, that's a very strong first pairing for defense for the Penguins. And then John Marino, you guys just signed this lead up to the start of the season, and I think John Marino is sort of the future of the Penguins defensively. So that's a huge one. And he may not have shown it last night, but I do feel like Tristan Jarry is a strong goaltender. I think he may not be the Marc-Andre Fleury that you guys kind of are used to, but I think Jarry will be able to get the job done and has the support around him to be a strong goalie in the league. So I still see the Penguins not, I don't see them at the top of that East Division, but I see them making the playoffs and being in a safe place to make a splash in the postseason and get some things done. Because we all know once you get into the playoffs, nothing else matters. Everything changes and anything can happen.
Exactly.
I feel like definitely with the top two lines, I mean, the top two lines are really solid, but then you look at those third and fourth. I mean, there's some really
third line was good last night, though. Third line was good.
Third line was good,
Yeah.
but I mean, the fourth line, I mean, some of those guys like came on and up. Like last year, sometimes they didn't Wilkes Barre, sometimes they're up. But that time's going to get some like getting used to. They probably won't get as much playing time, but we'll see. I mean, they need to step up because not the first line, second line aren't always going to produce every single game. So we're going to need the fourth line to every once in a while.
Okay, Kapanen wasn't in the lineup last night, and then we have to wait for Zach Gaston Reese too. So he'll be a fourth line guy. So you got two extra guys.
And I think we all know it. You need your depth players to be able to win in the playoffs. That's what makes winning teams. You look at the teams that have won it; they're getting production the whole way down, and they've got guys that are character guys and guys that are grinding it out and guys that are bringing that physical game. And it's all those elements combined that make a winning team. Just having a few good people up on the top line. I mean, that's sort of the case that the Panthers have dealt with in the past. You can't just rely on those top players to do everything. It has to be a full effort from everyone. And this year with the schedule and the potential for guys coming in and out of the lineup, it's going to be more important than ever.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you, Katie, for coming on. That was our last question. It was really fun. And we can do this in the future, maybe halfway through the NHL season, like what we think of what's going on. There'll probably be some surprises. Thank you all for listening. This will do it. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to get updates all the time. And subscribe to our email list. The link is in the Twitter and the Instagram to get updates on the podcast. And episode 15 is up. It went up yesterday and it's talking about some Steelers disappointing. And then the NHL upcoming season in Pitt basketball, which is playing Saturday against Syracuse again. So thank you all for listening. Remember, we are your one-stop podcast for everything Pittsburgh sports.